tech guru to your title. All right. Is it appropriate to start a council meeting with a little bit of yoga?
It's a little stretching. Big stretch. Taking a deep breath.
All right, let's go ahead and get this party started. I'll call it to order here. Our work session, first meeting of the month here. Announcements and communications. I'll start. Today is 1 year work anniversary for Mr. Kendrick, so congratulations, thank you for being here. The city is definitely in better hands than when you started, so thank you for all of your efforts. And on that note, we had a really wonderful pollination celebration. Was that last weekend?
Yeah.
What is time? Feels like it was like a month ago already. So thank you to everyone who put that together, especially Missy Varner. Thank you for always coordinating all of the wonderful events for Pine Lake, and the committee that helped with that. It was a beautiful event with a wonderful ribbon cutting, and it was great to talk to residents who were noticing all of the incredible work that this council is doing and this administration, and this public works director. So thank you. Okay, any other announcements or communications? All right, is there a motion to adopt the agenda of the day?
I move we adopt the agenda for the day.
Okay, second.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, great. Public comments. Seeing no public, we'll move on to new business. Okay, first item here is the code enforcement chapter rewrite draft. So since this is an ordinance, Attorney Balch, this is our first read, or is this just the draft before the first read even still?
This will be just a discussion of the draft and the policy choices that are confronting the council.
Perfect.
Sure.
That's what I thought, just making sure I got it right.
Rather than, the official first read will happen at your meeting in 2 weeks, and then we'll do the adoption in 2 weeks after that. But there'll be plenty of time between then for public comment, public input, and for y'all to discuss among yourselves without being a quorum present, obviously, but also with staff and with my office to make sure that the choices you want to make are things that we can all get behind and make sure that we stay between the little white lines on the road. Okay?
Wonderful. And just for the public context, we are undertaking this because a lot of the codes that we currently have are not really enforceable, or they don't have teeth. Is that, you can go deeper into that, but for those
The
listening.
draft that's before you is much broader than your current code with respect to property maintenance. The current code only addresses bank-owned or foreclosed properties. This code addresses all things that could be public nuisance. Conduct in public parks, noise issues, abandoned or inoperable vehicles, house maintenance, all those things, sort of soup to nuts, what I refer to globally as quality of life kinds of issues. This is an initiative that Councilmember Ramsey mentioned in my first meetings after I was first appointed as the city attorney. It's a priority of many of you on the council, and it was the council as a whole during your retreat indicated that you wanted this to be a priority. So we have gotten this done actually a month early. We promised that you would see it next month at this meeting, but you've got it now because we wanted you to have more time to digest your options, and the substance of this is much more broad and inclusive than anything you've seen in recent times, as far as I am aware. The goal of this is to provide as many tools as possible to the city to address how people manage their properties and how people maintain their properties. This is especially important for a lot of our absentee owners. It's also especially important for our visitors, because we want to be able to have a mechanism to help control behavior in our parks and our public spaces. So all of these things are part of the proposal that's before you. I'm actually going to talk tonight sort of in the 30,000 foot view of this ordinance. I'm not going to get into the detail because people can read the detail for themselves. The city clerk has made sure that the draft is posted on the website. There's a link on the landing page that goes to this ordinance for people to look at their leisure. Additionally, if they come to City Hall, then the clerk's office can have copies that we can print and provide to people that they can take home if they prefer a hard copy. At the very beginning, the section 16-1 is the purposes and findings of the council. Those are very important from an interpretive guidance standpoint. Obviously, whatever we do with this ordinance from the very beginning to its very end is going to have to be applied by judges, whether it's our own municipal court judge or appellate judges on appeal. So we want to make sure that the council's intent is codified in the language you adopt. Those findings and those purposes are important to help inform the court about what your intent is in the creation and codification of this ordinance. We then go through a substantial section of definitions that are all important and help create a common understanding of what we mean by technical language. For instance, if we use interest holder throughout this whole chapter, what we're talking about is anybody who has an ownership interest that is recognizable at law or in equity. That is a mortgagor, it is any kind of lien holder, any kind of mechanics lien holder would be a person of interest potentially. People who have interest in the ability to control the function of the property. Those are folks that we want to be able to put on notice and have them have their day in court if we cite someone or seek to have redress for a property, particularly when we start talking later on about nuisance abatement procedures or derelict properties. Those folks who have those legal or equitable interests in the property are very important people to have at the table so they understand that their interests are potentially being adversely affected by whoever the primary owner is not maintaining the property appropriate. Article 2 of the code starts talking about administration and enforcement. And the title of 6-23 is a little misleading because it talks about what are called nuisance houses. It comes from a concept in the old common law where shot houses are places where bootleg liquor was sold, houses where sex services were sold, those kinds of things were part of the code. So and that's kind of where this code section comes from. But if you read subsection B of 16-23, it talks about an affirmative duty on the owner of every dwelling, building, or structure within the city to maintain such dwelling in conformance with all applicable codes under state law and ordinances enforced with the city. That's a very important code section because if you flip over, I think it's 2 pages. No, if you flip over to Article 3, which is on page 8, there's a section for the adoption of the International Property Maintenance Code. The International Property Maintenance Code is one of the standardized codes that are available to cities to adopt, like the International Electrical Code or the International Building Code or the Fire Life Safety Code, all of which are adopted either by the Department of Community Affairs or the Insurance Commissioner and Fire Marshal. The Property Maintenance Code is an additional code that's available, and it has very specific guidance in it for how you're supposed to maintain and keep your property. It's the lever by which we are going to be able to look at properties, particularly some of our vacant properties that have sat empty for months and years, and talk to property owners and say, here's all the things you've not done. You have 30 days to fix it. And if you don't fix it, we're going to fix it for you and then attach a lien to your property and collect our money back that way. And if it costs more to fix it than what your property's worth, we're just gonna tear the building down. Now, there's due process rights that are applicable to that, because obviously the Fifth Amendment applies to us like it applies to everybody else in the United States. So if you have real property, we can't do stuff to it without due process of law. So there are opportunities to be heard and notice of what our concerns are that we will comply with and are codified in the ordinance. But the International Property Maintenance Code gives us those levers and those buttons that we can push in order to get some of these properties squared away and cleaned up. If you look at 16-36, which is on page 6 of the draft, that's the rules for how we expect our parks to be administered. I would ask that you each take very close look at that, because there may be rules or regulations in there that you don't want to adopt, so we could take those out. Or there may be additional things that you want us to consider that we can add to it before your final adoption in about 6 weeks. So I would commend that to both the community and to the council for your close review, comment, and input.
Mr. Balch?
Yes, ma'am.
Back in the summer of 2023, we had a citizen community or committee of fisher folk look into some of the other city ordinances around fishing specifically.
Yep.
I don't know if we have, did we ever do an actual ordinance adoption of that? We did not.
We just stopped the moratorium and
Okay. So
went back to where we were.
yeah, we put a moratorium on it for a while where we were doing a community review, and then nothing ever came of it, but there's probably documentation in past packets.
Yeah, there's state law that impacts the city's ability to control access to fishing and things that you do within fishing. With the suggestions we have in here, like barbless hooks and natural baits and those kinds of things, I've previously spoken with DNR representatives, and they have said, while there may be complaints, and if somebody challenges it, they'll have to say that it's outside of our jurisdiction to legislate. But by and large, DNR is not going to take a hard stance against local legislation. That all it does is regulate the mechanism by which fishing occurs, not the ban or prohibition of fishing entirely.
Mm-hmm.
It's that last step that a lot of communities ask for, that DNR goes sideways about if you try to get to that place. But they'll actually file lawsuits to prevent those kinds of bans, because there's, like with hunting, fishing is one of those things that people get very exercised about.
Yeah, and I believe the findings didn't recommend banning it outright, but having designated areas within the green space for fishing, and then I think also in alignment with what is written there about the barbed hooks and I think that, yeah, you were spearheading that, weren't you?
I was with, we went over some of that on,
Yeah.
with things
Um,
that we were banning off of there.
I think what we decided was that would be very difficult to enforce.
Yeah.
right, I think
And
that's
that
where we
was
got
why we
stuck.
kind of backed off of that, because, you know, if you can't enforce it,
Mhm.
it doesn't make sense to legislate it.
Just
So
for the
I
purpose.
think
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, for the purpose of your, kind of informing the next draft. And then number 14 under the fishing piece where it says swimming is unlawful,
Right.
obviously that's,
Yeah, we'll need to take that out,
Some
obviously.
updated.
As I say, what we've tried to do is not reinvent every wheel, but make it as specific as I knew how to accomplish in a first draft. But yeah, obviously the swimming is not one, because the lake is used for swimming on a regular basis. So yeah, there are Pine Lake specific things that need to be addressed, and I fully acknowledge that. But it's part of the reason why I need this conversation, because I've not been here and don't have the corporate memory that you do, Madam Mayor, or that Councilwoman Woods has with some of these historic events that predate my attendance.
perfect.
There's a substantial section on multifamily rental units that I commend to your reading if you have the interest. That's not a big issue for us, but it is something that we do need to be able to address. There is a substantial section, it's beginning at 16-151 for talking about noise abatement, and limitations of when certain power equipment can be used as far as what day of the week or what time of day. It is built around the idea that we will invest in some noise detection equipment for PD to use for enforcement of that ordinance. That's an investment to be considered with, in consideration with the administration as well as with the council. Those are not prohibitively expensive, but they are not inexpensive either. So the ordinance as drafted has noise limitations that may not be enforceable unless the council does invest in that equipment and in the training for your sworn officers to be able to use that equipment to address noise issues. What we have tried to do is address what, regardless of the noise that's at issue, when certain things can happen and when they can't happen. As you may know or may recall, the legislature went through a paroxysm a few years ago about allowing fireworks at all times and days. They then pulled that back at the very next year, and then they amended that same statute the next year so that fireworks are more regulatable, if that's even a word, at the local level than they used to be. But on certain days of the year, they're not. You can't regulate fireworks. New Year's, 4th of July, Memorial Day, Veterans Day, generally speaking. Why Veterans Day is one of those that they allow fireworks is beyond me, because the one thing that will set me off and just want to go hide is a firework outside my house. But it's one of the things that the legislature in their infinite wisdom said they didn't want to have local governments regulate. There are two sections that deal with derelict and blighted property. Derelict property is identified and discussed in Article 9. Blighted property is Article 10. The distinction in those is a very fine one. Primarily, a blighted property is one that is either occupied or unoccupied, that has certain physical characteristics related to its uninhabitability. In the case of a unoccupied commercial building, what the ordinance proposes is a 7 times millage rate increase until the blight is removed. So there's a financial lever that goes into effect once a designation of blight is imposed. That 7 times penalty is not available for occupied residential property. So if it's a unoccupied residential property, you can use that financial lever, and it applies to all commercial property, but not to occupied residential. Derelict property is the more common one. That's the situation where you have abandoned vehicles or unmaintained yards or dangerous trees, or dead trees, or abandoned vehicles, those kinds of things that are in a yard. If the property is not maintained and looks like it's not weather tight, those kinds of issues where there is a lack of maintenance on a property, then the building official would be empowered by the ordinance to inspect, render a report, and then issue a citation saying, we've noticed these issues on the exterior of your property, you have 30 days to correct them. If they don't correct them in that 30 days, then we file a petition in municipal court asking the court to order it to be abated. They then have another 30 days to fix it. If they don't or can't, then the city can step in and take those actions 5 days after that 30-day exercise. The ordinance also gives us administrative warrant and administrative warrant action that we can get ex parte from the municipal court that would allow us to go in and confirm that the repairs that the building official has required have actually been performed, so that the house is habitable and safe for occupation. The ordinances as a whole provide a mechanism by which we can assist property owners in maintaining their property and understanding what their obligations are. It's, as currently written, it has fines and penalties as part of the mechanism of enforcement. I am not personally a big fan of that as a mechanism of fixing quality of life issues. I'm much more in favor of civil remedies and things where people are incentivized to comply as opposed to punished for non-compliance. I have talked with chief judge, your chief municipal court judge about this situation. She's very interested in this kind of ordinance coming into effect and giving the municipal court additional tools to address these issues. She shares my concerns about criminal penalties being part of the code. And one of the things I need direction from y'all tonight about is, at least as a preliminary matter, which way on that lever do you want to pull? Do you want people to be able to, do you want the court to be able to impose fines and incarcerate folks for noncompliance, or are we looking for another means of enforcement? Councilwoman Bordeaux.
Can we, is there some way that we can impose fines but not incarcerate people? I mean,
Typically,
I don't want to incarcerate people, but I don't see how you can enforce anything if you don't have fines. I mean, we can't just put a lien against everything, you
Right.
know, and besides, we'll never get it. So I'm,
the challenge that you face with fines is that the mechanism of enforcement, if the fine isn't paid or the problem isn't remedied, is to incarcerate for the contempt. So what you can do instead is you can impose a civil penalty that may be up to the same dollar amount that would be capped for a misdemeanor in the municipal court. So up to $1,000 per day of the offense. But there's no risk of the person going to jail if they don't pay or can't pay. There's a mechanism by which we say, look, this is your warning. I am imposing $1,000 penalty for you failure to comply with the notice of violation. You have 30 days to fix it, during which time I will suspend that punishment, or that I will suspend that penalty. And the language is going to matter, so we're going to have to be careful both with how the judge puts it as well as how we write it. But the lever is still there, that if you don't fix it, not only are we going to fix it for you and then put a lien against your house to recover in your next tax bill, but you're also going to come out of pocket to us for up to $1,000 for every day that it's not fixed at your expense. So calling it a civil penalty versus calling it a fine may sound like lawyer semantics, but legally they have different functions and they have different remedies if they're not complied with.
can we put a lien for a fine? In other words, that $1,000, could we put that as a lien? And the reason I say this is because we as a 750 population city can't go around fixing all these things and then trying to get paid for it later. So, which sounds like the only way we would ever get paid.
Well,
If we could have a fine go against their, as a lien, that would be,
there's a limit that in the code is drafted on when the city's obligation to repair would kick in. There would have to be an assessment of the value of the property as it sits compared to the costs of the repairs. And if it is not cost effective to commit to perform the repair, it's like what you have happen with your automobile. If the car is damaged in a motor vehicle wreck and the value of the repair is 50% or more of the value of the car is not worth being repaired and therefore totaled, and you just get a new car. So the similar situation would apply. We would have to get an appraisal of the property in its as-is condition and then value that against the cost of repairs. All of these would be recoverable costs at the end of the day. But if the property is not repairable, then the city would have the ability in an unoccupied building especially to have the building removed and basically clean and green the parcel.
so would that apply to much smaller issues than a blighted house or whatever? For example, if somebody has an unlicensed vehicle sitting in their yard, we could tow that away. I mean, using that same process. Obviously, there's a due process
Yep.
thing, but we could tow that away, and then that would be, the cost of that would be a lien. I mean, but it just seems like that seems like a big deal to have to do every time that, or
sorry.
mow somebody's lawn, or do, you know, I mean, to get these smaller things fixed, that, it just seems like a lot of administrative administrative work to get that done. Plus, can we charge for one thing, can we get interest for that? And another thing is, can we charge for administration's work in getting that done as opposed to only the actual thing of getting it done?
All right, let me take them in reverse order because I'm not sure I can remember all the way back to the beginning.
Sorry.
No,
I have a
you're
lot of
fine.
questions about this.
There's, all of them are very valid questions, and I appreciate you asking them. And I don't say that to be patronizing, Councilwoman. I'm seriously interested in the conversation. So as far as the grass mowing or the edging of the sidewalks or those kinds of issues, those are the kind of situations where we hope we can motivate people to comply. We're not looking to adversely impact people's ownership in their property just because they can't mow their yards, right? So we're gonna do things to try to help them be motivated to accomplish that mission. The administrative costs of administrating the process are recoverable in the event of a demolition. So the administrative, part of what we have to be able to identify is that the penalties that we are collecting don't exceed the cost of the services that we're performing. So we have to balance that as far as the administration of the scheme in its entirety. So a lot of those fines or a lot of those civil penalties that we're talking about will be used to go back and recoup the costs of those minor projects or those minor time investments that we have for some of these minor things that you described. That's the way that would balance out. For instance, if it's a grass mowing situation and they don't mow their grass even after having given time, and we end up sending either some of our community service volunteers or somebody from the city staff to go take care of the yard because our code says we can, then the assessed value of that work, whatever that dollar number is based on the calculations of the administration, could be the assessed penalty that the court would take into effect in assessing what the cost of that is and what the final civil penalty is that has to be paid. So whether those civil penalties can be assessed as a lien and filed as a lien is an open question. There's not clear statutory or case precedent that establishes the answer to that question. So generally speaking, it would be a conversation for us to have with the tax commissioner's office to see what they're willing to collect on the tax bill as part of those assessments, as opposed to what they're not willing to collect. So that's a conversation to have with the constitutional officer about what his office is willing to do and not to. And I know I'm missing about 3 of your questions in what I've answered so far, so you're gonna have to help me with what else you were asking me, if you can.
I'm not sure I remember. But let me just peel off on what the tax commissioner's office would collect. So I guess in my mind, what I've heard about with this kind of thing is you have a lien, and then when you sell your property, it comes off of there. I mean, you get paid back, which could be a long time, but there's apparently
a
the
mechanism by
thing.
which you can attach it to your tax bill and have it collected as part of the tax commissioner's tax collection at the end of the year, so that it gets paid immediately, unless there's some administrative process where that would be put off. But there's a lien. The legal words tend to be imprecise, but there's a lien that you can attach that affects the title of the property. There's also a tax lien that you can apply that gets applied and collected during the tax year by the tax commissioner.
Okay.
So it's the same word, but it's applied and collected at different times.
Okay, that's good, 'cause I've never heard of that, but that would be better if we could get it collected
Sure,
by the
I'm not
tax collector.
suggesting
And
that the city needs to interfere with the mayor's business and take over landscaping the entire city. That's not my point.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I don't mean to
It's
pick
okay,
on
it's-
you.
Your jurisdiction. Go for it.
Couple questions.
Yes, sir.
Want to clarify, so the fine is $1,000 each day of the continued violation.
That's the,
So
Maximum.
theoretically, it goes on for 20 days, that could be a fine of $20,000.
yes,
Okay, like that. Because I think that's one of the things is many of our absentee owners, and specifically 3 properties that have been derelict, one a house to the point of it's collapsing on itself. We're not going to get money from them because they haven't cared about the property for 20 years, and so why would this start now?
well, we're gonna do an inventory, once this is adopted by the council, we'll do an inventory of those properties that are blighted and derelict and start working on how those need to be addressed. The properties that are derelict, we will go ahead and put through the process to have them identified and listed as derelict properties, so they get both a lis pendens lien against their title. That's the first part that you were asking about, Councilwoman Verbo. Then they would also have an assessment in their tax bill that would septuple the value of the millage rate that the council sets in the summer for that tax year related to their designation as a derelict property. So instead of paying 19 mills or whatever the assessed the current tax assessment is, you would have a millage rate of 136 mills potentially, 126 mills potentially on a property that was designated as derelict. That should get their attention.
Mhm.
It has that potential, but if the property is valued at $15,000,
But then,
and
then we-
I own the property as a tax write-off,
right, well,
that's my sole purpose of owning it.
and that's fine. Well, we still have other levers. That's the reason the blighted property is there in addition to the derelict property. And the blighted property has us be able to do an inspection of the premises. And if it's not habitable, we tell them you either have to fix it or we're gonna tear it down. And you're gonna pay us to tear it down if you don't demolish it. So that's the reason there's 2 separate sections to get people's
Okay.
attention, is we substantially increase their tax bill at the end of the year. Maybe they'll have noticed that it's gonna happen to them, but seeing it on paper as to what the tax bill is,
Mhm.
is a wholly different question. Then if that isn't a sufficient lever, then right after that tax year, if that's not gotten their attention to start making repairs and taking action, then we go back to the other lever we have with the blighted property, and we say, okay, here's all the things you gotta fix. And we actually would probably do a lot of that all at the same time, so we have both levers pulled at the same time and then figure out which one we wanna actually execute.
So help me understand the timing of this. So let's say we identify those properties in 2 weeks.
Yep.
They've been, this one property hypothetically has been identified as blighted and derelict.
Yep.
What's the time frame? How does that, walk me through how that process works?
So there'd be a building inspector, inspection that would identify whether it met the code definitions for derelict and blighted. They would receive a notice of violation saying, this property has been identified both as derelict and as blighted, and you have 30 days from the date of this notice to make these repairs that we've seen from the exterior of the property are necessary to make the property habitable. If they don't do that within 30 days, then we issue a complaint. We would file probably 2 complaints at that point. One would be for them to be declared a derelict property, and the second one to be declared as a public nuisance and a blighted property. And then they would have 30 days. We would then have to hold a hearing within no sooner than 15 days after service of the complaint for identification, and no more than 60 days after service of the complaint. So usually those happen within 20 to 30 days. You get a hearing on those complaints, and then it's an evidentiary hearing. The building official presents testimony. The other side says, I don't have the ability to do whatever it is that they're asking me to do. And then the judge makes a decision about our request that it be declared both a derelict and a blighted property, and then orders the abatement of the public nuisance, orders them to comply. They then have 30 days to comply with that order, And if they don't, then it comes back to us to decide what we're gonna do. And 5 days after that that third 30 days expires, then we have the ability to knock the place down.
So we're talking a little over 3 months.
Basically, yes, sir.
Okay, thanks. That just trying to figure out that timeline.
I mean, a lot of it will depend on court calendars and those kinds of things. We'll have to play the timing game with our judges to make sure that we get these heard in a timely manner. One of the things we're working with the municipal court about is to set aside a day on their calendar that is Quality of Life Day. It's basically Code Enforcement Day. It's separate from criminal arrangements. It's separate from the criminal trial calendar. It is just about code enforcement cases. And once they set that day aside, then we can plan all of our court process around that designated day, because we know every month when it's gonna be. That's not been finalized because you haven't adopted this yet, so I can't make sure that they're gonna be willing to do that without the authority of the council.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
thanks. Great questions, y'all. So what you need from us at this moment is just kind of a temperature check. Do we want to go the direction of civil penalty or criminal? Is that correct?
That's one of the things. I mean, the questions are helpful to me to understand where you are and what you want to accomplish, and whether our draft accomplishes the mission that has been set for us from both the conversation at the retreat, as well as my individual conversations with the 6 of you. So I think we got pretty close. Your questions are letting me know I got closer than I thought I had, so I'm glad that we're as close to accomplishing the mission you set out as we are. So what we need to do in the next 2 weeks, if possible, is to refine the draft, make the changes that we decide. I do need the temperature check on civil penalties versus criminal fines. If there's any other changes, I know Councilmember Ramsey's pointed out some things I messed up on my first articulation of this, so we'll fix those. So then when we do the first read at your regular meeting, we can have a second conversation at that time, and hopefully have some public comment at your regular meeting on this ordinance as well. Have a third conversation about this ordinance and be much shorter, and I won't be going through all the details like I have tonight, at your work session in June, and then the final passage of whatever the final product looks like at your work meeting in June. That's my timeline. Y'all's timeline may be different, but that's the fastest we can do it. And the information I have from the 6 of you is that this is a priority, so we've been trying to get it done as expeditiously as possible and amongst everything else.
I've got a question
Yes, sir.
on civil versus criminal. We're pulling this from a state guideline, if I understood your original email on this.
There is a state statute that defines the process that you go through to enforce the ordinance. The ordinance itself is obviously one I've written elsewhere, which saves y'all truckloads of money for me not having to reinvent that whole wheel. But the ordinance itself is not a state guideline, but the process by which we enforce it is.
Okay, so in terms of civil versus criminal, with your experience in seeing how other cities have dealt with this,
Yes, sir.
what's the adverse impact of criminal? Nothing makes a person pay on time sooner than the threat of incarceration.
You would think that were true. Unfortunately, it's not true. I have more examples than I care to relate to you where people are willing to go to jail in order to not have to pay whatever the fines are and leave the house in the condition it is when we started the process. So that is an unfortunate fact, particularly for some of the houses that are in significantly dilapidated states, whether they don't have the bandwidth to get done what needs to be done, they don't have the money to get done what needs to be done, or they have some mental illness that prevents them from getting done what we ask them to get done. Those three things combined create a perfect storm of non-compliance. And it is only when we offer them an out. That is, we say, all right, you can't do it, but you've got a mortgage that you're paying, you're gonna get assessed these dollars for the remedy. It's gonna be part of what's gonna be on your tax bill, and you're gonna have to pay it through your escrow payment every year as long as we're having to come back and take you to court to get it fixed. That becomes the mechanism of compliance that most often is actually functional. There are lots of cases I could offer you where people
Okay.
are more than willing to go to jail.
Okay, so your assumption is that using the civil route, and being able to attach this to an annual tax bill, that we're gonna wind up with better probability of collection, through that process.
That's been my experience, yes, sir. It's also, I will say, there's a number of cities on the southern arc of the metro area. I'm thinking particularly of Griffin, for instance, that have been very aggressive on the civil side of this process and really cleaned up a whole swaths of derelict properties across the city of Griffin. And they have used only the civil process. They've not tried to lock people up for this. The other issue that we face is that putting people in jail for not being able to maintain their house, this is not gonna be a very lawyerly answer, but it doesn't feel right to me, to be honest. And particularly when we're dealing with people that often have mental illness, some of the folks we're talking about are absentee owners, and we're not gonna be able to put them in jail. So the ability to get compliance by getting hold of their pocketbooks is a much more effective lever in most cases.
Okay. Many of the abandoned properties that we've got around here, I mean, they've been in that condition since I moved here, from the ones that I've looked at. I kind of doubt there are mortgages on those properties. I would tend to think those people just pay their property tax bill every year, and that's that.
Sure.
If that's the case, how do you deal with collections there? When somebody, has those liens or fines imposed on them, and it gets added to the tax bill, and they just don't pay their tax bill, how many years does that tend to go on?
Every tax commissioner is different about when they will seek to foreclose on a tax lien. And I've not worked with Mr. Johnson in a while to know where his current thinking of that is. When I last had the opportunity to have those conversations with his staff, they were typically 2 or 3 years into a tax lien before they would seek to foreclose. Because there's substantial costs to go into a tax sale, and those costs get added to the bill, so there needs to be enough value to make it worthwhile for the tax commissioner's office, frankly. So there's all kinds of choices and risk-benefit analysis and return on investment questions that the tax commissioner has to undertake about when they're gonna pull the trigger on those questions. So there may be a 2 or 3 year lag on some of these properties, but ultimately, if these properties are being held for tax write-offs and people are gonna lose the benefit of their bargain by losing their property in a tax sale, then we still get our money and they don't have the right to continue to own the piece of property. I would expect that in a lot of these cases, if we threaten to demolish a property because it's so far gone that it's not recoverable from any kind of reasonable repair standpoint, that's gonna get people's attention. That they're either gonna, sell up, offer to sell it to us, or take some other action to get out from under the burden of having us fuss at them all the time. There is overhead cost with this. There is police time with code enforcement being under Chief Green's leadership. There's administrative costs to city staff.
Sure.
There's costs with my office. So there are lots of things that go into enforcement of this, but those take a back seat to the concerns I've heard from the council over the last 5 months for how these properties need to be addressed. And your code currently doesn't address any of these questions that are being addressed in the draft.
Okay, thank you. One last question,
Yes,
and
sir.
that is our short-term rental policy. We did a resolution on that last year.
Okay.
Does that resolution need to be updated to
It probably needs to be
reflect this
codified.
code?
Yeah, it probably needs to be changed to an ordinance and codified.
It may be an ordinance.
I
I'm
think
not-
it is an ordinance.
Okay.
I thought it was.
I've
Yeah.
frankly, since your email communication to me, Councilman, I've not had a chance to review that with the city manager. That's on next week's agenda for me, but we will review that and see if there's any changes to be made in light of what we proposed here.
All right, thank you.
Oh, 1 second, you had a question a while ago.
Yeah, well, there's another to me, a whole section, just kind of not unrelated, but different than this, which is multifamily. I read through this, and my understanding is that of this, and I've never heard of this before, but that the landlord or whoever would have to have an inspection of each of their properties, pay themselves for an inspection of each of their properties in order to have an occupational, and I call these business, it's a business license.
Yeah.
That's what's the right word?
Occupational tax certificate.
Right. So we currently do not require that, or else our landlords are not doing that. Is that something that we should be doing?
There is not currently anything in your code.
I don't
that
mean the inspection, I mean that they have an occupational tax.
They should be paying an occupational tax certificate in order to conduct business in the city, yes.
Is that not true, Missy? We don't have, landlords don't come and get a,
Are you talking about certificate of occupancy?
no,
No.
occupational tax,
No,
otherwise known as
no, they do not.
as a business license at one time.
They've never had them.
They do not.
Since I've been here.
So I'm wondering if that's something, first of all, that we should
Yeah.
do and make sure that those landlords are, if that's a business, then they should be paying that. We should know who they are. And then going down the road, if we can implement something where they're required to at least once a period of some time have an inspection, because to me, that's a big problem in the city, which is, that we have no way of making sure that these landlords are providing a livable space. And so I was encouraged to see that, and maybe we need to put that on hold to talk about it more, but I just wanted to get that out on the table, that
I will have you that answer by your next meeting. You'll probably have an email response before then, but the city manager and I will get to the bottom of that and have an answer to the council as soon as we can.
So my guess is, since this is, to me, sort of the beginning of let's revisit a lot of our ordinances, and
Yep.
this is just the first step, and my guess is this is the beginning of a dominoes falling. Doing this is gonna say, oh, we need to look at this, this, and this, because it's in here as well.
Yeah, and
Is that-
your zoning administrator / acting city clerk has already said that the zoning ordinance needs revisiting as well. So, yeah, there's a number of different things and that are on our radar for what need to be considered.
Yeah.
And prioritizing what that is the reason why I communicate with you all so regularly to say, all right, here are the 3 or 4 things I see. You tell me what order you want them addressed in. So that's the mechanism by which we go through that process, So, but you're absolutely right, Councilman Goldberg. This is the first of what will be a number of rewrites and reconsiderations that will go through in the next year, year and a half.
So for me, I'm looking at Article 7 on page 24 about vegetation. There'll be no dead or hazardous trees, but that really should be covered under the tree ordinance, which it really doesn't do. And specifically in regards to derelict or other, what's the other terminology? Derelict or blighted properties. And that's a big hole in our tree ordinance. So it's like, yes, it says it here, but trees wouldn't be covered under this ordinance.
Well, they're not covered as far as the homeowner removing a tree that is not already dead or certifiably dead. The tree ordinance covers things like making sure that you're not cutting down specimen trees that are still quite viable, which happens more often than I care to reflect upon. So the mission of the tree ordinance is to protect live and viable trees. This is a public safety ordinance and a life safety ordinance because trees that are dead or dying need to be removed in order to prohibit or prevent them falling and causing death or damage to neighboring properties. So the reason there's a particular code section in the nuisance ordinance is because there's safety issues related to these that the city needs to be able to be proactive with. The tree ordinance is about protecting the canopy and protecting the forest-like appeal of Pine Lake so that you don't end up with people clear cutting and trying to turn their properties into subdivisions in Cherokee County.
So then what I know with the tree ordinance, it goes through the process of if you have a tree that is identified as dangerous or deceased, dying, sick tree on a neighboring property, what the steps are for you to make sure that when it falls on your property, the other homeowner is liable. I don't necessarily see those steps here. I'm not sure if they would be.
They're not here because what this ordinance is designed to do is to allow the city to be proactive rather than responsive. The tree ordinance is a more responsive ordinance where the citizens are coming to us and saying, hey, I have this problem I need you to help me with. This ordinance authorizes the city to be proactive and send the code enforcement official or the building official out into the community and start looking for where the problems are and working with homeowners to fix those problems before we have to come fix them for them.
Okay. So again, this is not a hypothetical. This is real. There's a property near where I live
Yes,
that
sir.
has a dying tree on it that's been identified by an arborist as a tree that needs to be taken down. The homeowner who's out of state, and it's a house that is derelict,
Right.
refuses to do it and says, you're welcome to pay for it.
No, we
What do you-
will, and then we'll put the bill back on them. I mean, it's not a situation where they're gonna get away with that forever. We're gonna take steps to hold them accountable, make sure that the municipal court is holding them accountable in an appropriate manner, and then try to get their compliance with what their obligations are as a property owner. And if they don't wanna comply with their obligations, then we'll take care of it, but we're gonna make sure they pay that bill.
And what you're describing is that's being handled through the public safety, looking at it from this is a danger.
Yes, sir,
Okay,
precisely.
great. Thank you. That was a big concern I have.
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
I heard that from you loud and clear.
Okay, so I have a little issue with some of the language. The designation of drug and illegal gambling houses and houses of prostitution. I don't know why we need to designate those things that are already illegal. I don't know why we need to tie that into homeownership. My concern is that I have seen laws like that used very broadly, especially against gay people. And I know that doesn't seem like something that could happen here, but it seems like we're kind of going backwards as a nation, especially Georgia. So I don't understand why we need to include that here for things that are already illegal.
There's two reasons for it, because the conduct itself is illegal to begin with, but the use of the property is a separate concept which is independent of the illegal conduct. Obviously, if it's drug-related misconduct, then the property is subject to forfeiture. With illegal gambling or illegal prostitution or other quality of life crimes, there's not necessarily the forfeiture provision that the Drug Control Act provides to local government. So what we do in a public nuisance circumstance is we use those old cases from the basically House of Ill Repute kinds of days, if I can date myself a little bit, and use those old cases to say, we're redefining or broadening the definition of public nuisance to include these other kinds of offenses or the other kinds of conditions that pose a clear and present danger to the community. That we use the health, safety, and welfare powers granted to us by the Georgia General Assembly to say these are all of the kinds of things we think constitute a public nuisance. There's these old common law concepts which have long been codified in Georgia, but those common law concepts then inform the more newly codified and statutorily authorized concepts like house maintenance, habitability, those kinds of things, making sure that people are taking care of their property and that it's safe to live there. So we're using those old common law tools in a new way that allows us more flexibility in responding to newer and more modern challenges. I doubt seriously most of incorporated DeKalb faces significant problems with illegal gambling houses, houses of prostitution, or drug houses in incorporated DeKalb. And that's not a slam against unincorporated DeKalb. It's just that when you've got people concentrated in cities, there's more police presence than the county police force or the sheriff's office can put in the field. There's more eyes on the streets. There's more ability to pay attention to those kinds of things. And there's just not the opportunity to turn vacant or abandoned houses into those kinds of squats or opportunities for illegal activity. So it's not a common instance in cities, but it is a tool, and by including it in the ordinances, one of the things that we can have the ability to take care of, we are then able to say, look, this is just simply an extension of the old common law rules that we've always had as cities to address the health, life safety, and health and welfare of our community.
It just makes me uneasy, especially like since there's not like a proven need for it. Like
Sure.
we don't have an issue with it.
Sure.
And so like going back to like House of Ill Repute rules in the past, it makes me uneasy. So
Sure.
I appreciate your talking through it.
Yeah, look, I share your concerns about those old stereotypes, and it's not my intent to recommend to the council that they revisit those old stereotypes. That's not the purpose here. What I'm trying to do is provide you a ordinance that is demonstrably enforceable and provides every tool available in the legal toolbox to address the concerns that the council has expressed are top of mind for the quality of life of your citizens. The mechanism by which you do that is you rely on old language, but you don't have to rely on old stereotypes in the enforcement of that language.
Thank you. Going back to Jean's talking about the fishing, there were a lot of things that we could not legislate or were not good to police, like you mentioned. But one thing that was the fishing license.
Yep.
And could we include that in this? So instead of saying that you've got to do all these monofilament line, 10 pounds breaking strength, just having a license on you?
The license is required by state law, so anything we would legislate locally would be preempted and not really enforceable separately from the state statute that says you have to have a license to fish in Georgia. So I don't typically recommend that we reinvent wheels or add additional offenses that we wouldn't be able to write a citation for anyway. So whether there's some dispute about whether or not that has to be issued by a Fish and Wildlife officer or whether any sworn law enforcement officer can write a fishing without a license citation. I think it's the latter. DNR tries to take a position it's only them and we have to call one of their officers. There's one in all of Metro Atlanta. The
Okay.
5 core counties has one DNR officer. That's not sufficient to respond to the calls. So the idea that they're going to be responsible for enforcing those rules when they can't get people to respond to calls is nonsensical.
So just to be sure, our police can't ask for a state license?
Yes, they
If it-
can. I think they can. And it's my advice, if the chief runs into that question, I will tell her that she can tell her troops that she can ask for for the person to produce a fishing license. And if they're over the age of 16 and they can't produce it, that's a citation and we get their equipment.
I think that's an excellent way to go about that. And then real quick, in the public use of city parks, there is a thing about serving, possessing, or consuming alcoholic beverages. And I think it's a very Pine Lake thing to have a glass of wine with your neighbors and watch the sunset. So I would not like to see that criminalized. Is that something that we can take out of this?
The short answer is yes. The broader answer is, state law provides a criminal remedy for public intoxication, which is available and chargeable by your police department. Possession and I would not want to take out the serving piece. Possession and consumption would be the compromise I would offer for you, Councilman Torrent. The serving piece, I don't want people coming around with, a cooler and selling beers out of their cooler in our parks. I think that's a slippery slope down which we don't want to slide. Not only are they doing it without a license for sale of alcohol, but it's creating an atmosphere where illegal sales of alcohol just becomes commonplace. That has all kinds of other concerns for me. If the council desires, we could take the possession and consumption out of it. I would recommend against taking out the service piece.
I can agree to that. Also, I'd like to let it be known that I lean more towards civil penalties as opposed to fines. So if we're trying to get a consensus, that is my own. Councilwoman Woods, you had your hand raised a long time ago, and just kind of.
I think some of them were answered, and some I had kind of covered on here about the animals and the horses in the city. I think we've had a couple of events where people have had horses over here for a special event, but then we've also had somebody that just come riding through on a horse, so I don't know.
We actually have had that happen.
Yeah. Yeah, we've had just horses ride through, and then we've had a party where people had cowboys that came over and did like a rodeo kind of thing. So I think we need some clarification on that.
Okay.
I went out and talked to him.
And
Well, one of the things you might want to consider in that regard, Councilwoman Woods, is I don't know that I would want to charge for the issuance of a permit for those kinds of commercial entertainment kinds of venue expositions that you just described. But if you created a mechanism by which either the property owner, and this only applies to your public spaces, it does not apply to individual properties. So if somebody was holding a birthday party at the lake house, for instance, and they wanted to have entertainment with some sort of horse demonstration, I think it would be appropriate to require that person to obtain a permit from the city with some sort of nominal fee attached to it, just to make sure that we have the ability to track when those are issued and requested, in order to limit the opportunities. And then also the permit would have requirements that they clean up after themselves and all those kinds of things, so we don't have people trying to go to the lake and swim at the beach and dodging horse leavings, shall we call it.
Horse leavings?
The technical marine term was the first thing that came to my mind, and I shut myself down, Council. So,
I've just never heard it called that. That's great.
look, I struggled with what I was going to say.
I appreciate that.
Okay.
Last thought in regards to fishing, I know we had at some point talked about having designated fishing areas, and I know we don't want fishing in the swimming area, and I don't see, if that's something, do we need to determine where those areas are? Do we want to determine where those areas are to have them included in this, or is that completely separate?
To be honest with you, it's my reading of this DNR's regs that we don't even have that authority to restrict location of fishing within designated swimming areas. Even in state parks, if you've got a open body of water that has a swimming area, the state does not limit people from fishing, even though it'd be the dumbest thing ever to drop a line where there's all this splashing and carrying on in the first instance. But I recognize the concern that you're seeking to address, Councilman Goldberg. My suggestion to you is I've gone about as far as I'm comfortable going in the ordinance of limiting the mechanism by which fishing occurs. If we go further and start trying to regulate the place within or around the lake or in your streams and rivers where fishing occurs, I'm very concerned about DNR coming down on us and telling us the whole thing's out. So I want to be careful that we don't cross that threshold with DNR to make sure that we are doing what we can to protect our resources, but not going so far that the state thinks we're infringing.
So
Mr. Walsh, could we not codify it, but still put up signage?
What a great question.
The signs that we're drafting right now that are going to be basically a rewrite of the existing signs, we were just going to highlight an area as a preferred fishing area. So when people come and they reference the map to see, they'll see, oh, these are the fishing areas without saying you absolutely cannot. But kind of encourage that as the fishing area.
I think that addresses your question, Councilman Ramsey. I'm fine with that solution, is, sort of quietly suggesting as opposed to restricting directly. I think that's enough of a gray thing that we can say, look, we're not telling people they can't fish here. We just said this is a green area. And besides, who's going to want to fish over there with all the noise and jumping around anyway? So I think that's a compromise I can live with. Yes, sir.
Okay,
Cr-
thank you.
Chris, help me understand this. Why, you said it had to do with like allowing people to hunt and to fish. They can't do that on private land necessarily. Why public? I don't understand. What's the reason behind that we can't legislate our own area? I don't understand this.
The short answer is the General Assembly has said you can't with respect to fishing and hunting. It is,
We don't allow hunting.
well, unfortunately, you don't have the power to not allow hunting, because it is completely lawful in Georgia, in incorporated areas, for people to either bow hunt or hunt with firearms if they see a animal that is subject to harvest by state law during hunting season. It's a regular phenomenon that happens throughout DeKalb County, that you'll see deer either shot dead and harvested or walking around with an arrow in their shoulder because somebody has seen them walk through their yard or walk through public space and taken a shot, but not killed the animal in the process of taking that shot. So it is, and I have no better explanation to you than to say that's what the statute says. And it feels like a cop-out to me, and I don't dispute that it is, but the statute is very clear. Hunting and fishing is part of the heritage of Georgia, and the General Assembly has said we're not going to do anything that interferes with the lawful performance of hunting and fishing within the state of Georgia. And nobody below the state has the ability to codify or restrict those activities in any way.
Not even for public safety? You
Correct.
mean you can go out there and shoot a deer with people standing around?
Yes, ma'am. I agree with you.
Should we put that in the news blast?
It is the dumbest cotton picking
I'm
thing
not
I've
from
ever read.
Georgia, and I've never heard about anything like this. I'm just appalled. I am. I can't believe that.
Yeah.
That we could have somebody out there with a shotgun or
Well, they would
a
have,
weapon.
they'd have to follow state hunting requirements. So there's certain rules about what weapon you can use to hunt during certain times of year. So there
But
are
any
state,
time of year,
rules.
when there's people around,
Yeah, I understand, but I think what I'm hearing you saying is there are state rules that we can't touch
Yes, sir.
that involve fishing and hunting,
That's correct. Yes, sir.
whether we agree with them or not.
No matter
Okay,
how
so we
stupid
just
they
have to
are,
get
and
shot, huh?
No matter how adverse to public safety they are, we don't have the power to say anything about it different.
Wow.
okay, thank you.
And I had
Okay.
a question
Yes, ma'am.
on,
It's
because
crazy.
the judge is gonna be looking at these. Does she have any discretion on as far as the fines, or is it just a set fine and that's going to be
There,
how it's
no.
enforced?
Once we rewrite the code to address the civil penalties issues, the civil penalties will be assessed up to $1,000 per offense. And each day will be considered a separate offense. So we will codify that language, but the up to provides the judge the discretion to set much lower numbers or up to that number, or to not charge every day of the offense as she chooses based on her findings and the egregiousness of the case before her.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we've got a few more times where we'll be discussing this. And thank you so much,
Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you.
So,
Attorney Walsh. This is
Yeah.
a lot to chew on. I'm sure your inbox is going to be packed for the next 2 weeks. Okay, let's move on to item number 2, the property tax calculator, understanding property taxes. And this was in the strategic performance report that everybody received last week from our city manager. And I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Hawthorne.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and good evening to everyone. So of our 4 new business items, 1 down, 3 to go. An hour into the meeting, but good job. That was a good exchange, and our city attorney, I think, did a very good job. I thought it was timely to at least share some information on this topic of property tax, given the time of the year that it is, with the tax digest being assembled and policy decisions that will be coming before you on setting millage rates based on new assessed valuations. So just a topic of interest, and not to mention a proposal that you're going to be hearing, you've probably read already from one of your colleagues, and I particularly wanted us to be somewhat on the same page on this topic of property taxes. And I chose to do it in a way that shared a series of articles or analyses or reports which involve some calculation of taxes and how they're applied from a real estate perspective. And I kind of went from, in the order of the articles, kind of a national comparison down to ultimately looking more specifically at DeKalb County and, of course, the city of Pine Lake. So I'm going to do highlighting, particularly from the standpoint of the issues that stood out to me, because in composing these, it was also an opportunity to educate myself as well. My experience in the state of Georgia is all of the time that I spent in College Park, which was relatively brief, and of course now being here in Pine Lake. So my eyes were popping on some of the things that I discovered, and even though our finance director isn't here, he had to educate me, because the property tax structure in Georgia is quite different than what I'm accustomed to in other states, and some of that was captured here. So kind of high level, because I really want to focus on, when you talk about property tax, it's easy to think my property taxes are too high. I mean, that's what we hear, and they are, because people have other needs, and they're dealing with the cost of inflation, but local government falls into that same category. We're dealing with those same costs in order to maintain services or improve upon services. So in that first article, a couple of things that stood out to me was just simply pointing out across the U.S., property taxes are the primary tool for financing local governments. It's not anything that is unique to any given state, and certainly not Georgia. The article pointed out that higher median payments tend to be concentrated in urban areas, which of course we're in an urban area. And this is partially explained by the prevalence of above average home prices in urban centers, and we certainly know that to be true. Now, as far as comparison, kind of on this national level, it can be difficult to make comparisons between states. And this article points out some of the reasons for that. Rates don't mean the same thing from state to state or even county to county, because the millage is often imposed only on a percentage of actual property value. So if you were to take the argument of, you know, my millage rate, and I would tell you that millage rates are defined universally, so that is something that is in common. When you talk about a millage rate, that's a dollar value or tax on every $1,000 of value. So that's the thing that is consistent. But if you say, and I'm just going to use Pine Lake, 19.4 mills. Well, 19.4 mills in the state of Georgia isn't the same thing as, say, in the state of Connecticut, where I was just prior to coming to Georgia, because that millage rate has to be applied to something, the assessed value, which is certainly tied to the market value. But what is the assessed value? What portion of that home market value is subject to taxation? And in Georgia, for the most part, we know that it's 40%, such as here in DeKalb County. You might have noted in DeKalb County, there's even an exception, Decatur, where it's not, the 40% is actually 50%. And my experience in the state of Florida, for the most part, when you talk about assessed valuation, then it's 50%. And of course, the lower the assessed valuation, the lower the ultimate tax is going to be. Just as a note of comparison and referring to some of my experience in Connecticut, as we talk about 19.4 mills in the state of Connecticut, the millage rate in the jurisdiction that I worked was almost twice that rate, 35 mills. So one way to compare, even between states, is to look at effective tax rates on owner-occupied housing, the average amount of residential property taxes actually paid expressed as a percentage of the home value, really talking about the market value. And so in the last paragraph of this first article, when it gave some examples of different states, Georgia isn't listed in this particular article, but it gave you those states that where it is very high, New Jersey being the highest, 2.23% based on their millage rate and whatever their assessed value over those market valued properties. And then the low, at least in this article, was pointed out as South Carolina being 0.51%. Now in the second article, and with kind of that basis of comparison that I'm going to kind of stick to and getting up to the end, the next article, which is now more focused on the state of Georgia, indicates that in general, property taxes in Georgia are relatively low. The median real estate tax payment in Georgia is $2,048, about $1,000 less than the national average. And then they convert that to the average effective property tax rate in Georgia is 0.83%. Now, I pause on that 0.83% because it's important for you not necessarily to compare that to the percentages that I just went over in that first article, because that 0.83% in Georgia is based on the assessed value as opposed to the market value. So if it was based on the market value, that percentage would be even lower. And then on page 3 of the Strategic Performance Report, just giving a comparison at the county level of DeKalb and how DeKalb County compares to Georgia, and then the national level, and those various percentages. Now, I'm going to page 5 of the report just to focus on the city of Pine Lake, more specifically. So in Pine Lake, Georgia, property taxes are calculated using a combined millage rate of 19.4 mills. That would equate to 1.94% of assessed value, as you have those other percentages in your mind from the other articles. This rate is applied to the assessed value of a home, that 40%, rather than the full value of the home. So if you look at the city of Pine Lake, and the pie chart that was on page 6 breaks it down, even though we may consider, relative to other Georgia municipalities or even DeKalb County, that number to be high to 19.4 mills, we see how it actually breaks down and who gets what. So of that 19.4 mills that generates for this average home value of $294,000 assessed value, the school district gets 60% roughly. DeKalb County government gets 30%, and then Pine Lake gets 10%. So even though we own that 19.4 mills and certainly accept, the burden that it places on our neighbors, it's important to also remember that it's supporting other services at a much higher level than the city itself. Now that 19.4 mills, which of assessed value is high compared to other cities, 1.94%, kind of getting up there to the New Jersey level, except that New Jersey figure was based on the actual market value. This 1.94% is based on the assessed value, so it's not apples to apples. What would the apple to apple comparison be of the market value for the city of Pine Lake? It would be 0.78%. So maybe high in one area, but across the spectrum, including nationally, as stated in the second article, Georgia property taxes, including Pine Lakes, compared to the nation, is relatively low, and certainly that assessed value has a lot to do with it. The other thing that I wanted to point out that was provided to you on page 7, on page 6 on page 5 was the section that the finance director indicated on exemptions. And one of the things that occurred to me as I was reading this and being aware of Councilmember Ramsey's proposal are the number of exemptions that are in place, and I think we've got to do a better job along with DeKalb County, to be honest with you, and they've recently sent us some information that we're going to be sharing in the e-blast and on our website. Just information that would be important for our neighbors to be aware of. And so when you consider the exemptions that are already in place, we need to make sure that that we're getting the word out and helping to educate on those exemptions that are already available. And so with that, it was just something informational that I wanted to share with you, particularly as you go into your next discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So this is really, really helpful. I think just the breakdown, I know you sent this last week, and as I was reading through it last week, I was like, wow, the perception that, oh, the $6,000 a year that I pay is going to Pine Lake, but actually it's a very small
10% of
amount
that.
of that. Yeah. So with that, let's go into item number 3. This is a resolution proposed by Councilmember Ramsey to establish a tiered property tax relief program for senior citizens based on income levels. Councilmember Ramsey, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you.
It's all the way toward the back.
Yeah,
y'all.
I found it.
Okay.
I found it. Okay. Thank you, City Manager Hawthorne, for the education on the exemptions and so forth that are available. There has been a lot of publication done within the city on the various county exemptions that are available. In addition to the basic homestead exemption, but the senior citizen exemptions that are available at 62, 65, and again at 70 years old. Basically, those exemptions, for the most part, eliminate, at least the 65 and 70-year-old ones, eliminate to some or an entire degree the school taxes from the equation. That does not change the fact that for a handful of our residents who face the possibility of being priced out of their homes by taxes, even with those exemptions in place, if someone is on a fixed income, collecting Social Security perhaps as their only source of income, average Social Security income nationwide is less than $20,000 a year. If that's their only source of income, they're probably not paying taxes on it. But still, a tax bill of $2,000, which is a reduced tax bill after they've gotten their county exemptions, still is 10% of that income. That's pretty substantial hit for those people. What I'm proposing here is an exemption tiered based on income that would provide some tax relief. I used a template from another city. For instance, the $1 to $30,000 income bracket with a $1,500 property tax reduction. That certainly is not something that we need to be fixed upon. We're probably looking at less than 10 households within the city of Pine Lake that are going to qualify for this type of reduction. And this number doesn't have to be $1,500 if the Pine Lake portion of their tax bill is only $700 or $1,000. Maybe
or
it would,
200
or
according to the
200.
median home value on this.
Well, I don't think the median home value in Pine Lake is 220,000 anymore.
294 is what is this from the most recent census data? Do you know?
I don't know.
Okay. Anyway, sorry. to
Anyway,
interrupt.
that would be,
Yeah,
that would be 5 years ago.
right.
You know, in any case, this is a long process that requires
Mhm.
state legislative approval. This is not something that's going to happen this tax year, but it's something that we as a council should be looking into, just so we don't price a few individuals out of their homes unnecessarily. So what I would be asking here is that the council consider a resolution in one of our upcoming meetings that would ask the city administration to look into the number of households that might be impacted,
Mhm.
and clarify what the process would be, and this would come from city attorney, clarify what the process would be to the council to basically put this in motion. To my understanding, Chris, it'll probably take, if we were to move forward on something like this, it would take a minimum of 12, probably more like 24 to 36 months.
We, depending on what the council wanted to invest in the process, we could probably get it done next legislative session, which would be the January to March of next year. But in order to get the local delegation's attention, it's going to require probably hiring governmental affairs assistance from somebody who can help navigate the puzzle palace that is the Gold Dome, and that's not me. So let me just own the fact that I can talk to them, I can explain why you want to do something, I could even draft the legislation and have it ready to go straight to Ledge Council's office. But as far as getting their attention and getting it passed through the process, that's not me.
But if we were to bring it to the attention of Senator Jackson and Representative Davis and get them to bring it forward on our behalf, that would be the route.
Yes, sir. All it requires is local legislation. It has to pass both houses by 2/3 majority. Most legislation passes without objection by a voice vote. And then it has to come back to the city for a referendum at one of the general election cycles after the bill is passed in the legislature. So we're talking about getting the bill produced next March, go into effect and bypasses the governor, so we don't have to worry about that stuff. But then we would do the call of the election and have the referendum for the voters that November of 26.
Okay, thank you. So what I would be looking for is sometime within the next 2 months to get this on the agenda for council to consider a resolution to start this wheel moving.
Okay, Tom, I believe in this and I think it is necessary, so I'm going to poke at it because I want it to succeed, so I'm going to put up the blocks that you're going to have to jump. In the 2024 census, we have about 20% citizens over 65. And our median single household is about $65,000. So I think 10 households is a very conservative estimate of the number of people that we're talking about, and that's how much we're going to be spending on this. And as we saw, the amount that we take from property taxes is very, very small. So perhaps instead of having these dollar amounts, if we did a percentage of what is paid to Pine Lake, mostly because I don't think that we should be spending the money that we take in to pay for other DeKalb County bills.
This would not impact anything other than the Pine Lake levy.
Okay, so like the 10%
Right.
that we take. So I think instead of doing like a dollar amount of the tier, I'd like the tiers.
Yeah, I'm not focused on any dollar amount. It could be a percentage, it could be a lower dollar amount. That's totally open. Like I said, this is a template basically. And I just pulled those tiers from somewhere else that used these tiers.
So yeah, we can. These are all things that we need to
Sure.
figure out and work out. And my biggest issue is how are we going to pay for it? And in the resolution or in the proposal, that is a bracket of like specific funding sources. We had talked about using the hotel motel tax revenue and permits from our STRs as going towards that, but we haven't implemented those yet. And so we can't really say how much we are getting from that. I would like, state grants are kind of come and go, hit or miss, so I don't think we can depend on those. I think we need to figure out how we're going to pay for it before, but that should be our first objective, is to figure out funding, specific funding. And that's tough. I think that I've talked about impact fees, but like we could put one of those buckets towards this as well.
Sure.
So there are mechanisms that we can put into place, but we need to get into putting those separate mechanisms into place before this can.
Well, we've already got, for instance, an ordinance on short-term rentals that's been on the books for how long now?
6 months,
Almost.
8 months?
Almost a year.
Almost a year. When will we implement that?
That's a very good question.
Okay.
So I have a comment about that, and that is that we implemented a very complex system, and again, we're putting it on administration. Now you're talking about another really complex system that would have to be implemented, and maybe 10 people is underestimating it. But you're talking about a very small proportion of our residents that are going to benefit from this. And you're choosing older people, I mean, people over 65 or whatever you use, over other people who may have the same problem.
Young families.
I mean, I just don't understand why we would want to, I mean, what I think is going to happen, how we're going to pay for it is the rest, whoever doesn't get it is going to pay for it. That's how it will get paid for. So whatever we reduce on for older people, that's going to be increased on everybody else. A lot more people, so it's spread out more, so that's, that's okay. But, and then the cost to the city is going to be the cost of administering this program. I mean, you're talking about individual applications for this benefit. Then, identifying what that is and whether we can give it to somebody. We approve it, or there's some process to approve it, and then all that has to go to the county in order to apply it. It's a very complicated process, and I can't see the benefit, the cost benefit of doing that. So I think there's a lot of reasons. I mean, maybe there's some other way that we could help people to get past this. I mean, maybe Plain could help people pay their taxes. I mean,
I
it
don't
doesn't
think
have to be
that's going to
Plain,
happen.
but
But
I'm
Gene,
just-
what I'm asking here is not that we start a tax rebate program or an exemption. I'm asking that we start the process of exploring it. I'm asking that the city do the homework and find out, will our administration actually have to process those applications? Does the county have a mechanism to do that for us? Like where we currently would go down and apply for a homestead exemption?
In
I-
most circumstances, and I have not reviewed the SDS as it applies to Pine Lake with DeKalb County, and the SDS is the service delivery strategy. It's the mechanism by which the county assesses countywide taxes against citizens in Pine Lake for services that the county provides. The constitutional officers, jail, tax commissioner, probate court, superior court judges, superior court administration, those kinds of things. So there's a contract that is negotiated every 7 years between all the municipalities in the county to provide certain of those services. I don't know how many of those services that are normally performed by the tax commissioner are included within the SDS. They're in Fulton County, particularly with the newer cities, the service delivery strategy pushes all of the local homestead exemption out paperwork to the local governments. The tax commissioner doesn't do any of that. The statewide exemptions, the homestead exemption that applies to every homeowner who has a residence as their primary residence, that one is done by the Fulton County Tax Commissioner's Office. But all of the any other individual homestead exemptions that apply only to state or only to local city taxes, the city has to handle those. So I don't know the answer to how that works with Mr. Johnson's office and the tax commissioner.
It would be good to know that.
So we will get those answers and get that information to the council. In most circumstances, as far as I'm aware in DeKalb, Mr. Johnson's office handles all of the exemption issues for all of the cities. I just can't speak with authority about what is the situation with Pine Lake.
Well, I think either way, we're talking about a partnership with the county, talking about administration, but certainly the city will have a role. And even to get started with this, and to the Mayor Pro Tem's point, I mean, my first recommendation would be to you, we need to do due diligence. What is the potential fiscal impact? It can't be a guesstimate, and yes, that's going to take some effort. In saying these numbers, and Councilmember Ramsey has explained it, I will tell you that it absolutely frightened me. But I understand now that you just took a template. But one of the options that the state has also, I guess, made more flexible, and this goes back to HB 581, which again was kind of perplexing to me, because you just made a decision because of, I believe, the potential fiscal adverse impact to opt out, and we just got the certification of it. We never really knew what the financial impact was with that, but it frightened us enough that we thought we needed to opt out. I'd want to do a financial impact on both. And then let's look at it, and maybe you want to reverse, your initial position on that. And I think that's one of the things that the amended House bill made easy. It gives us more flexibility in opting in at almost any point that we want. But yes, to proceed with this, it's going to be a laborious process. City attorney's already suggested that at some level, we're gonna have to get some external help, and potentially even for the parts that we have to do of financial impact, because this is a pretty complex proposal that, no, I don't think the county's going to do it for us. We're probably needing to look at getting some assistance.
So, I've got a couple comments. Having gone through some of the application process in the last couple of years for some of the additional exemptions, one is it would be great if, and I'm curious because I spoke with a resident today about one of the senior exemptions and that they were turned down, and my understanding of the process was they applied for one of the exemptions, they were turned down for that, but they weren't offered, maybe you qualify for one of the other lesser exemptions, and the county is very specific that if you ask for this one, that's the only one we're going to consider. And so I think there's an education piece with our residents. So I know when I applied for one of them, the potential was if you don't get that, you're going to lose the one you already have, was what I was told. So the county has their process of doing these additional senior exemptions is you really need to know what you're doing when you go down to apply for them. Otherwise, they're not necessarily going to really help you. Just a couple random thoughts is the tiered levels. I like the idea of, property tax support in some fashion. Well, we lower the millage rate. We voted for a very high millage rate this year. We can lower the millage rate. That's also going to have consequences and results of that. If we're talking about doing something like this tiered level, instead of creating additional work, could we not just adopt the similar requirements that the county does for their exemptions? So if someone comes in and says, I would like to get, a Pine Lake assistance, well, which of the senior exemptions do you have from the county? Well, I have H7. Oh, well, we already know what stipulations they've met. And then there's no examination of what we would have to do administratively other than just look at their property tax and what their exemptions are.
I think from that standpoint, the income levels allowed for most of those county exemptions are quite high relative to the individuals that I described who might be on a fixed income. The county limit for their, what is it here, their H10 or H9. You can see the H9 senior exemption, the income limit is $110,000. Pine Lake would certainly not give a tax break to someone who's making $110,000 a year. Okay, that's not at all what I'm looking at. What I'm looking at is, even if we took out the 50 to 75 range or the 30 to 50 range, I'm concerned about those people that are making under $50,000. Maybe those people most making under $30,000 who own a home and struggle to just put food on the table, pay their taxes, and pay their electric bills. I don't think that, and I thought I made it clear in the email accompanying this, that when I sent it out, that these numbers were not, they're just there as placeholders. That could be a $500 exemption, which might be 30% of their Pine Lake portion of their taxes at that point. What I'm really suggesting is that this is a real issue for a few of our residents that are here a long, long time, and it would change the nature of our community to lose them based on taxes that they're not able to afford. and it is worth our time and effort to do the homework and do the research and see if there's a way that we can accommodate helping them in some way. And I'm encouraged that Attorney Bosch suggested that although he hasn't addressed it with the Pine Lake government, city government, that to your knowledge, the DeKalb County Tax Commissioner does handle that for most of the cities in DeKalb County. That's a very positive thing that could administratively help us out a lot. So all I'm asking is that on an upcoming agenda, we put just a few of our residents first and start the ball rolling to look at this. We're not passing a tax exemption. We would be passing a resolution to ask our attorney and our city management to explore the process.
Can I
Thank
ask
you. So-
a clarifying question to city manager or the city attorney? So the resolution, this draft that we have before us, kind of lays out an actual program with who's eligible, how it's administered, what those assistance levels are. And from what I'm hearing from council, we're nowhere near the point of adopting a resolution that's this specific.
Oh, no.
So what
No,
is the
but
process?
when we bring
Is the-
something up
hold on.
when we bring something up to get it on an agenda, our instructions are that it is to be brought forward in the form of a resolution to be discussed.
Great. So my question is, in order for the due diligence, I mean, I completely agree with City Manager Hawthorne, I think, and what I've heard from council here, there's so many questions. I think the spirit of what you're putting forward, I fully support. And there are a lot of red flags, if you will, in terms of how many people I don't want to base any of this on assumptions. I would like actual data. How many people would this affect? What's our true median home value? Going back to Mayor Pro Tem's question about, does it make sense to only do this for seniors, or would it, expanding that pool? Those are all just really important questions, I think. What's the process then? Do we need to does council need to accept a formal resolution to start that inquiry, or I guess?
No, ma'am, you do not have to adopt a resolution. You can direct staff to undertake the background investigation that you're asking about without having a resolution on the table. I would also suggest that with your city manager's input, that the analysis of what you can afford to do, the particular funding levels that are called for in the draft resolution, would need to be something the administration would take responsibility for. There are some wordsmithing that would need to be done from my chair for how the final resolution took place in final form, but there's all kinds of input that we would need to get from all the various constituencies. But the first and foremost one is, what is Mr. Johnson's office going to actually perform, and what does the SDS say that his obligations are? Because that's going to define that aspect of the conversation. And then the second piece is, as the city manager's already indicated, the complex nature of how it's going to affect the bottom line of the city's revenues, and whether or not we can afford to actually accomplish that mission or not, because we need finite data that we can get from the tax commissioner, but how that would be applied or what the income levels of those households would be, they're going to require some sociological inquiry as well, in order to make sure that we understand who may qualify at what level for what relief.
And then the other question that comes up, there's a section in here, and I know this is just something to respond to, but if it takes effect on a specific date and will be reviewed annually for its effectiveness and sustainability, the question that comes up for me is, there's this extensive process to implement it. I'm assuming there's probably an equally extensive process to revoke it.
Anytime you start changing homestead exemptions or
Yeah.
income taxes, generally requires legislative action by the Gold Dome.
So if it's not working and we're finding, oh, actually, our, you know, we have 50% of our residents qualify, you know, because demographic change or whatever, the process for undoing that and the effect that that could have on the bottom line is just something that,
You're looking at probably, because you would not only have to go back through the legislature, you'd have to go back through the referendum process as well.
So within the nature of doing, if we choose to say we want to request that there's research done on this, in my mind, we are going to be talking about millage rate in the not near distant future, which is talking about, again, affordability of this city. And we've heard repeatedly from, I can't tell you how many people, that it is unaffordable. We voted to raise millage rates last year. I voted no, but we raised millage rates. So within the context of looking at this, are we not also starting the process of what's our potential for millage rates, the impact on budget, what that means for us in the big picture to determine the scope of what we can and cannot do? So is that not something you're going to be doing in the not near distant future anyhow?
Yes, and that discussion will be happening, and you know, there are instincts of a city manager having been doing this as long as I have, and I understand the relief issue. It's also a matter of perspective. What is the relief? 10% of that total tax bill for a whole lot of effort, but that's
Sure.
that's just, you know, 1 + 1 = 2. But I think you're also at a point in this council, what I've learned before I got here, that you're interested in, I'll call it, right sizing. And I have to believe that for you to get to a point of increasing the millage before I got here, something was propelling that. Because on the other side to relief, which everybody wants, is we need to invest in this community. We need to start to do some things that we haven't been doing. Your whole discussion tonight on the code enforcement chapter is we need a chapter, and then it's got to be implemented. And yes, it's going to require some resources. And then you were kind of on that domino effect. This is going to lead to some other things. So, yeah, I'm a bit perplexed at this. I understand the relief. I do. Don't get me wrong, and I'm as empathetic as anyone. But I've also heard you say, and I see the need for it myself in my assessment that I've done. We're going to need more resources to get some of this stuff turned around, because Pine Lake does need to be invested in, and that $2 million is only going to last for so long.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So the fiscal impact is so important. And before you go down a road, even conceptual, and it's just my position, you know, let's not unintentionally mislead the community. Professional perspective.
Hold on one
Yeah.
second. Jean's had her hand up for a while.
So I just want to say that I understand that you're only looking for a study into this. A study into this costs us money, costs us time. You also want to have the short-term rental process taken care of. It hasn't even started. And,
That's a potential source of income.
pardon? Say it again?
Short-term rentals are a potential source of income.
I don't think so. But maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But they're not, they're not a source of income over and above what the administration of them is going to cost. The administration of the process that we passed for short-term rentals is going to take up a huge amount of time that we already know the administration doesn't have enough of. So to do, you've already asked for a number of things, including the code enforcement, making those changes, that those are going to also affect the administration. And as Mr. Hawthorne says.
I think we're all asking for code enforcement, Gene.
So, as he says, we're saying we want to keep the millage rate down. At the same time, we're asking for more and more services. The only way that he can provide those services is to get more resources. Resources cost money. We already need more resources to do what we're doing. So what I'm saying is you can't just keep asking for more and more and more and not expect that we have to raise the budget, increase the budget, and therefore increase the millage rate to pay for that. So I think we have to be very careful about what we ask our administration to do, because it's going to cost us. It sounds easy. Let's just do a study to figure out what's going on, but all those things take time. So
I realize that we have asked a lot of the city administration. I realize that we have put forth many things, including code enforcement, including improvements around green space and lake infrastructure, and all of those things cost money. And yes, that probably will mean a millage rate increase. And that millage rate increase will hit this handful of people harder than anyone else. That's all I'm asking for, is that we're going to face that millage increase no matter what, just by what we've already put forward in the last few months. What I'm saying here is spend the time, do the research, and if we can help out the handful of people that are going to get impacted most by the millage rate increase that is probably coming, we should do it.
Well,
Just my opinion.
Well, I'm not so sure that the handful of people that it's going to affect is only the people over 65. You've got a lot of other people in this city who have problems with paying their taxes, and I just think, well, I guess I just think helping out a handful of people by spending a lot of time and money creating a process that is just for a handful of people is not what we're here to do. We're here to do the best we can with the money that we have and the resources that we have. And I feel bad for people who can't pay their taxes either, but we can't solve all the city's problems here. I mean, and when I'm serious when I say find another way to help solve this problem. If you think it's a serious problem, then go to the people who can afford their taxes and maybe a little more, and put together a pot of money for people who can't pay their taxes. I mean, this is the kind of city that can do that sort of thing. But doing it in a legislative way, doing it in a way that involves the whole city and legislation and all of this for a handful of people does not sound to me like the best use of our resources.
So it sounds to me like there are two avenues that have been proposed in addition to just the information gathering. One is that there are a lot of existing exemption programs for the county that Councilmember Goldberg mentioned people probably don't even know are there or how to navigate those systems or exactly what's available to them. So one question is that something that we could get into? And then the other proposal I've heard a couple of times is, are there other processes by which we could do some of this alleviation that doesn't actually affect the tax digest and the legislative process that entails? So for instance, identifying a funding source, a pool of money that's $10,000 or something that's renewed outside of that, and then an application process that's managed external from a legislative and tax process, potentially. So I think those are really important questions to explore as we are going down this road. And I'm thinking there's a lot of this data, like the median home value, all the census tract data is publicly available. Is that correct? Is there a way that Councilmember Ramsey, could you compile, before we go down the route of allocating administrative resources to it, could you go through the process of compiling census data and get a better sense of just high level what you anticipate?
If someone
the
shows
impact?
me where to find it and how to do it, I'll be happy to do that.
Great.
Could I also offer a
Can I just finish one thing? The county has been very good about its communications regarding its exemptions.
Mhm.
And there are multiple discussions on both of the city's Facebook pages every year, beginning generally February, March timeframe, about that topic. And I've talked to multiple people who had no issues going through that process this year, and found the county to be quite helpful.
Great.
And that's fine as far as the county taxes go. And, I'm talking about the city taxes here. Yes, I realize it's a small piece of the pie, but it's an important piece of the pie to some people.
So what I want to throw in is, I think there's also a third thing, which is, are we getting all the money that is due us? So I want to go back to commercial property and the horrific assessments that they are undervalued to a just unbelievable extreme, where many homes are valued more than apartments are in this city. And so, where are we not getting our values in terms of tax money, liquor licenses, what's happened to the Shell station, and we're losing all that revenue because they haven't been rebuilt and reopened. What can we do to get our commercial properties assessed at a reasonable valuation? And you all have seen the spreadsheet that most of those have not increased in value in 6 years. I sure would love to have my house not change in value in 6 years. When I see a apartment complex selling for $500,000 and the county assesses it at $325,000. So I think the third piece is, are we getting every dollar we can? And where we're not getting our value, we need to start putting efforts into that.
So I just like to say that I would be much more supportive of that kind of time and effort put into that, which benefits everyone if we can get taxes paid as they should be, and especially in the commercial. I mean, that shocked me when you put that stuff together, and I think, there's got to be something going on with the county that they're not doing right. And to me, that would be a really good use of our administration's time and effort to look at the overall issues that where are we not getting our taxes that we should be getting. And then that's going to help those people too. But and Brandy's suggestion, I don't know if that's possible to do. Chris, could the city have a grant fund for people who can't pay their taxes or have issues with,
Or a different organization outside of the city.
The short answer is the gratuities clause in the state constitution would prevent the city from doing that. The longer question is, would there be a public-private partnership that might help? I don't know. And it's not my field of expertise, but I know that there are a number of cities, and I apologize for keep referring to Fulton, but I do a lot of work in Fulton. So I know there are a lot of cities in Fulton where they're exploring these same kinds of conversations. And there are not, because of the state of the constitutional law in Georgia, there are not good alternatives other than the kind of homestead relief that Councilman Ramsey is suggesting that the council explore. And as we've discussed, once you pass that, having it rolled back, it becomes a Herculean task. For instance, in 2020, sorry, I'm going to get my years screwed up. In 2024, Brookhaven passed a change to its homestead exemption that would have modified how the homestead freeze worked for Brookhaven local taxes. That proposal went to referendum and went down in flames 80-20. So once you pass an exemption, it is there almost always forever, regardless of what fiscal reasons you come up with for why it needs to be rolled back or changed. The conversation is an important one, but there are lots of moving parts to the conversation, and once you pull a trigger on a decision either direction, that decision gets baked into the psyche of the local government for a long time to come. And changing the direction of that battleship is very, very difficult.
Yes.
This will be my final comment. I consider this to be this proposal to be pretty monumental for all of the reasons that debate has kind of covered in comments that I've made. But I'd like for the council to also keep in mind, and I'm going to use two examples. One of the reasons why you do a budget and you go through a process is so that at any given moment or meeting, some idea may hit someone, whether it's that person or a governing body member, and it's taken out of context of the full budget, and you're needing to set priorities. Similarly, when you think of a strategic plan, and you all have done a good job with your retreats and substitute for a more long-term, but it's kind of at least intermediate term. And I think one of the biggest challenges when I got here was recognizing that of this body, you're having gone through that process and having set priorities, it was, let's catch up. And I think in these last couple of agendas, you've seen where we're trying to catch up and get moving with some momentum. A project of this magnitude, ultimately, and cost, quite frankly, significant cost when you're talking about county, state, city involvement in processes. I think it needs to be considered in the context of when you're considering other strategic priorities. And we just got through the spring kind of retreat and you're setting priorities. So just keep that in mind. If at any given meeting something is plugged in as the latest priority, how does that compare with your other priorities.
Thank you. Yes.
I would like to just remove this from discussion. It's pretty clear to me that there is no consensus to move forward with it.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, let's move on to item number 4, the first task order recommendations. Mr. Kendrick.
Good evening. All right, what you have before you is a task order number 1 proposal, and it is from our engineering consultant, AECOM. It is the proposal to modify the 404 Nationwide Permit 3 and associated applications to do the work as prescribed by the council in the wetlands associated with the lake and the dam. I'm sure you have opportunity to read through the proposed scope of services, and the proposed fee is not to exceed $64,976, and that gets us all the way through modification of the permit and into implementation of the proposed work that the Corps accepts under that modification.
You ready?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I read through this. There are a couple of questions that all come from 433 hours needed for an application process, specifically looking at it's going to take one engineer 2 straight months of doing nothing but this, doing 40-hour weeks for 2 months to do memos. And I'm just looking at what is the length of time that this is going to be, and this is just task 1. How many other tasks do we have after this? Just walk me through.
Okay. All right. All the tasks are done on a time and material basis. Okay. And as I indicated here, the $64,000 is an upset limit. It could take all the way up to that, but I anticipated taking less than this. It just depends on how we're going to attack this. Is that we've already been brainstorming on. We did a field walk in the wetlands with the group, the permit coordinator, the engineer, Mr. Shahid, that you met here last month, another stormwater engineer they brought out. And we walked through, spent some time, a couple of hours in the wetlands, and they had some initial thought to the Corps. And I think what they indicated is that this is similar to a situation that they faced most recently in Tucker with another lake that wasn't getting the inflow such as ours. So what we're going to do is propose that type of solution to the Corps in anticipation of them granting us the modification to move forward. Thereby, it would cost us less time and investment with that other engineer that you're seeing have all those hours, and focus more on a permitting coordinator, which still should shorten that time frame. And they are trying to develop that time frame now, and as we have been talking, the proposed time frame that I put before you a couple months ago before we hired her, we're still within that range. They're looking to solidify that and bring it to our town hall meeting next week so that we'll have something, more concrete to be able to work from. But all this hinges on, getting the authorization to move forward, because right now, what we're really doing is just in the data collection stage. We don't even, they're not even working on this until you approve the task order, but they have been doing a lot of preliminary work, such as, a lot of things that I provided, like the buffer variances. We've got 3 buffer variances from EPD based on other projects, based on those other core permits. We just need to, once authorized, they need to, look at those and see if they apply to whatever our proposed work that we're going to sit down with the Corps and propose and get them to sign off on. So we've got about, I think it's 3 or 4 different ideas to, present to the Corps that we think will solve the problem in a shorter amount of time. And we just need to get the sign off on the Corps, or we need to get task order approved so that they can start presenting those to us. So short answer is the $64,000 is an upset limit. I don't think, my initial estimate of this was, if you recall, when we presented the CI, a 6-year CIP, it was right around $45,000. So we're still kind of in that range. And I'd say, I think that's probably where we're gonna end up doing this particular. Then of course we'll, turn out what those improvements, and if they're structural improvements, then there has to be engineering plans associated with it. But if they're non-structural improvements, then we're still within, this pot of money.
Mhm.
I guess that's what red flagged it for me, is it was a 50% increase of what you had considered that it would be.
And that was just a best guess. Haven't actually did a permit modification, just, talking and those types of things, and just taking a percentage of what I proposed to be a structural cost. And if you will look back at that 6-year CIP, I think I proposed was like $150,000 for a structural improvement to the situation. And we did throw around some of those things, and a lot of these improvements, now from my standpoint, what I'm trying to minimize, and it goes toward longevity and being able to maintain whatever improvement that we come up with, because we've got to fit that maintenance inside of our budget.
Mhm.
There's a lot of things we talked about that, hey, they'll work tomorrow. And I'm pretty sure if we get the Corps to approve them, we could initially, out of this pot of money, afford those. But when you start talking about year 3, 4, 5, and so on, I don't want to be here yelling at me about why did you do this.
So you feel like the time table, the task order budget, breaking down how time is going to be spent is reasonable?
Yeah, we've already had some of those discussions, and that's why, I asked the same question. I mean, you got 2 engineer 3 here, and I already met one that's assigned to the project, and, I'm asking, what's your role gonna be in this? And it's, not so major at this point. So, we're gonna be able to minimize those hours as it regards this task.
Mhm. Thank
Uh,
you.
Regarding the scope of services, basically items 1, 2, and 3, and I'm assuming, I guess I know that you've already walked with this crew,
Yes, last Tuesday.
the property and so forth.
Yes.
The nationwide permit 3 that we already have and the existing buffers that they have, that we already have, and you say we have 3 of those.
We've had 3, 2 are expired, one will be expiring next year. That's the
Okay,
the nationwide permit 3 that we're operating on, it expires in '26. The buffer variance associated with that expires along with that.
okay. So we've got another year
Yes,
about on that.
yes.
What do you think is the probability that our proposed scope of work falls within those existing permits and buffers?
If they approve our proposed work, then the buffer variance and the modification are extended. So we don't have to worry about it being expired.
Okay,
We'll get a new buffer variance and we'll get a new.
automatically,
Yes.
yeah. And does ACOM feel good about that? That,
Well, let me put it this way. We've got, like I said, discussed 3 or 4 different ways to attack this situation. And all 3 of them have a price tag associated with them, low end versus high end. And they're looking at what they've done previously, like I said, in Tucker. Okay, so all of those, like I said, price tags associated with, but the most important thing that I was looking at was the aftercare, the maintenance on the back end. So you might have, a low impact now, but that might have a larger maintenance associated with it.
whatever we do, I understand we've got to
Yeah.
maintain
And-
it going
right.
forward.
And then there's, one that's, I would think, sort of toward the middle to where, it's one of those things that it's gotta be on a maintenance schedule, but it requires, some outside support. It doesn't have that much of a, it's not that maintenance intensive, but it's a lot of factors that play into it that where it could, but you would see some immediate impacts. So, it's one of those things that where we go to the Corps and we'll say, here's what we're thinking. The Corps might say, hey, we're good with all of them. Then that brings it back to us, and we've got to decide, do we want something that's, a Cadillac versus, a Yugo? Don't make
Or are we gonna get a Maverick?
Oh, Maverick, there you go. I like the Maverick.
You like the Maverick?
Yes.
All right.
So, yeah, so, no horse leavings. So,
Okay.
Yeah, so that's where we're at. We want to get in front of them with our professionals, present our case based on proposed scope of work, and give them 2 or 3 alternatives, and see where what their thinking is. And all options on the table. We looked at repair of the dam, ownership of the dam. There's maintenance associated with that. Those, we figured out about the 2 pipes that are out there, those types of things, just in that initial field walk. We still like to hear from Mr. Zaris,
Yes.
and we talked about replacing the diverter box, those costs associated. That's a engineering, structural solution. Drives the costs up.
Mm-hmm.
Those types of things. But, just initially sitting there, doing the field walk thinking, there could be, some non-structural and structural solutions. So, a hybrid type of thing that comes in that, the Corps would say, hey, whatever you guys want to do, we'll permit, because it was initially considered under the initial permit. And, we move forward. So then that'll turn into what the real cost would be for design and construction.
Okay.
Thank you.
I appreciate that you're not just looking at getting it fixed, but you're also talking about long range. And so the Cadillac fix may have the lower long range cost, but the low cost fix may have a higher long range cost.
Or
So
vice versa.
there's a lot of, I think we're at the stage, where, again, you're building a house, you take time to invest in the foundation.
Mhm.
And then everything else is solid. So I think this is, to me, this is like the most important part, is in investing the time and energy, and that the ACOM really having a plan and knowing the lay of the land, doing the research they need to research, so that that helps us make the best decision we can with the money that we have to spend. And I was trying to coordinate a meeting with previous Mayor Zaris to meet with AECOM, and that didn't work out at this moment. I also recently have talked to a resident, Karen Stiles, who did a lot of research for part of a doctoral dissertation on water quality and the effect of the wetlands and information like that. And I don't know if any of that would be useful for them to know some of that data as well.
Yeah, that's part of what we call like a non-structural solution. I mean, we'll take all the information that we can get, but the first order of business is, as I see it, would be getting more water into the lake on a more consistent basis. And if we could deliver that, then we start talking about how to maintain that water level in the lake based on the inputs that we can generate back upstream. And then we'll have to consider what the water quality impacts are, because we already know Snapfinger is a possibility to be an impaired stream. And so we want to do that.
Yeah.
So, quick question, for the funding of this, it's either SPLOST 2 or the additional 2 million?
The 2 million.
Okay, and then, for Chris, for an action tonight, it sounds like you're asking for council to go ahead and authorize it. Would we authorize it proactively and then ratify any specific contract in the next agenda? Or maybe to city manager, you might already know about this.
I think we're just looking at consensus tonight with the plan to bring back for formal action at your next meeting.
Okay,
That was gonna be my preference, but I hadn't talked to the city manager about what he needed.
I'll put you
so-
both on the spot simultaneously. So. Okay, great. So then, is there a general consensus from council to go ahead and authorize this to move forward, and we can formalize it next meeting?
I think
Okay.
so, yeah.
Awesome.
Yes.
Great.
Mr. Kendrick, before you go, do you know the lake in Tucker that they had worked on? I'm going to do
You
some.
mentioned it, and I wrote it down. It's in my notes.
Okay. Just want to do some independent research and see how that went.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Kendrick. I appreciate you have the expertise to navigate this very cumbersome process. Thank you. Okay, public comment. Our lovely member of the public, would you like to comment? Okay, great. Reports and other business. City manager. This wonderful.
Mayor, on the strategic performance report, I've certainly highlighted the portion that I composed, but I would like to give other staff who are here, if there's just anything they want to take a minute or two to highlight in their reports, AKA Mr. Kendrick in particular.
And you thought you just got comfortable.
He wanted to add to the agenda, and I said the best I could do is you could highlight SPR submissions.
Yeah, thank you, city manager. Let me get, first off, it is, we were asking for a proclamation, May 18th to, the week of May 18th to the 24th, 2025 is designated as National Public Works Week.
Oh.
And we were, the theme for this year is People, Purpose, Presence. And so I provided in here a sample of the proclamation, APWA, which I'm a member of, and will be making sure that the city becomes a member of, proud member for over 27 years. So it's a great professional organization, networking. That's where I can pick up the phone and call a lot of people that, done these types of things before, and they have answers, or can point you towards somebody that could have a substantive conversation regarding, you know, some of the issues that, they're facing or we're facing and those types of things. But anyway, we're asking for a proclamation for National Public Works Week. Also, we know that the council, and I would think it would be probably the number 2 priority would be the investigation into a green space recreation master plan. And that comes on the heels of, you know, we're doing our tennis court renovation, and there's other ideas from citizenry about dog parks and all those things, Poplar Park, you know, all passive parks and those types of things. And I've heard it many times before that we need to start doing things in a comprehensive manner. And so that's what I want to put forward here is for our next task order regards for AECOM is to pursue a green space recreation master plan, and just highlighting some of the typical key elements of a green space recreation master plan of vision and objectives, site analysis, green space recreation typology, connectivity and access, ecological environmental strategies, design guidelines, community engagement, implementation plan, management, maintenance, and monitoring and evaluation. So if any of those key elements did not hit some of the things that you guys are thinking about, I'd like your input into that so that we can bring this back for action to move forward, start addressing these things in more of a comprehensive manner so that we can have a blueprint on where to go next with the dollars that we have inside of not only the $2 million pot of money, but we still have some money in SPLOST 2, you know, regarding recreation.
Would the master plan also include the conversation we had started sometime back about level of service for the different green spaces in terms of?
Everything has a level of service component to it because it fits in, and I know what you're getting at. I still owe you guys that, and I am working.
What wasn't going there,
Yeah,
but
it's Missy's fault because I didn't get it. No, but we're gonna put that and start tying all this back together, and so we'll have a real tight level of service for the city, and I'm feeling a little bit better about it over the last couple of months as level of service going. That, you know, it caused me to change a few things in it, so, you know, but anyway, that's answer your service. Way to slip that one in there.
Thank you.
so it also sounds like with the community engagement that maybe could be not the next, but another town hall would be beneficial to
At
get
some
that
point,
community
because
input.
If you see, one of the elements in here is community engagement. So yes, I think things like this deserve a public meeting, not a hearing, but a meeting to get input from citizens. You know, we don't necessarily have to meet in person. We could put a survey online, or you know, or something, or you know, in the news blasts, and you know, just post a email address, and people could submit their comments. You know, folks have no problem, you know, approaching you guys and you know, sharing their thoughts. You know, you got Plain, you got Seed, all those folks, you know, routinely, you know, have ideas and comments and those types of things. So, you know, I don't think we have to come back with a formal one, but make a space for the community to make their thoughts or their wishes known.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you,
I'm
Mr.
not
Hendrick.
finished.
Oh, you're not finished?
No, No, I got a little bit
Right.
more. And the next thing, street sweeping program. You know, this,
Uh-huh.
this goes toward, you know, our stormwater management. We're gearing up right now for our annual completion of our annual MS4 permit. So, you know, there's some things inside of that permit or that, well, actually, their permit, but the report that we submit to the state that we have to quantify. And one of those things are, you know, the amount of leaves that we remove, the debris that we remove. We even have a report on the amount of dog poop that we collect. And so this will give us is a precursor to the next thing that'll be coming before you guys. We want to, as I mentioned before, do a deep cleaning in our curb lines prior to us paving. So we want to make sure we get an accurate depiction of what our streets are prior to putting out you know, bids for our street paving, so that we can get a best price and determine if we do need to mill our curb lines versus just going with an overlay. And I also take this time to update you on, since somebody said it was a marathon session last month, we did have our roof project. I'd like to report that we're 75% done with it. Those, 463 Clubhouse Drive, 470 Clubhouse Drive, and 462 Clubhouse Drive, the roofs have been completed. And the only roof that's left is 425 Allgood Road, and it'll be done this Friday. It would have been done sooner, but it rained us out. So, ADA program, Rockbridge Road is complete. There are 7 ADA ramps. So Mr. Lewis Miller, who made the observation, he couldn't traverse the, now he's able to do that. And so, and I'd like to note also, that was not at any cost to us. It was simply a coordination with DeKalb County to get that done. So we still have that full amount of money you guys allocated to get done the other ADA compliant issues here within the city limits, such as the ramp for the tennis court, and we'll be looking at the boardwalk. Hopefully some of these things can get done before beach season opens, and so have more accessibility to the beach. We just talked about AECOM and that task order and the potential for the master plan. The Christmas lights have been ordered. We actually, I want to thank Chief Green, she helped out on that. You allocated $25,000 toward that. We pared that down. We're getting all the lights, 20 poles, yard lights, those types of things for $12,500, and that's including the discount. So we still have.
From the same source?
Yes.
Nice.
Yes.
Does that include the Pine Lake?
Yes.
Really?
Yes. And we still have the electrical that's gonna get done, and our initial, that's gonna come in a little bit less also, so. The equipment that we purchased was, the Maverick and the golf cart are here, and like I said, that made so she loves it because it provided a different view of going around the city, you know, versus being in a car versus in a cart, and those types of things, and being in that smaller vehicle versus that big, huge thing. It just made serviceability around the city a lot better.
Can you send that to me?
We did put our equipment on Gov Deals. The surplus equipment you surplus months ago, it looks like we're gonna walk away with about 15, 16 grand on that equipment. Yeah, we'll spend that next month when we come back. And Oak Road, we did give notice to proceed and notify the residents last month. This goes toward one of those material delays, tariff-type issues. Doing a drainage project, we start downstream before you go upstream, so that way why we did not start grading the ditches, because we didn't have the material in to be able to construct that portion of the project prior to going upstream. But we did get the trees removed from Mr. Gordon property, so we're moving forward with that. They've mobilized and they're on site. The 462 Clubhouse Drive, we still haven't named it yet. We're probably about 40 to 50% done there. We did get the remediation done, so it is mold-free. We got the encapsulation done on the crawl space, and we got the new HVAC system. So what we're looking now is just to get the plumbing done and to get the actual inside renovated. And that should start in earnest next week. The tennis court, another material delay as far as fencing. So that's gonna probably be pushed back another 3 weeks, but it'll be dovetailed into getting the fencing done, and then they'll come right back in and do the surface repair. And the tree over Snapfinger Creek, we did get that pared back. We couldn't get the whole tree trunk because we couldn't allow the piece of equipment. I felt it was too heavy to put on the dam. So what we're gonna do is, we're gonna do a project to take down some of the vegetation on the slope, not eliminate it, but just take it down. We're gonna get a slope mower, and that'll allow them to extend this. That slope mower has a boom on it, so we'll be able to extend the boom, and they'll cut the tree and have to pretty much just cable it out of the creek. And but we're coming back and get that done. But that's your update as far as past month and of the.
Mayor, just a final comment on Mr. Kendrick's report. He must have been reading my mind because I hadn't had a chance to talk with them today, but I was going to ask him to add a section in our next strategic performance report that keeps you updated on the various projects, in addition to, I know he's looking at Councilmember Ramsey's spreadsheet.
Oh, I already got that done. I just didn't print it out.
Okay.
All of that is so
All right.
I'll be
So regular reporting to memorialize for you as well as the community.
Great, thank you.
A quick question, with the tree, is what's being done with the stump of the tree that's across
it's
the
on
creek?
private property.
So that's up to the residents, the owner?
Yeah, we're just following our rules, right away to right away, removing it, and then, we're not gonna go on private property to remove the stump. That's no
Okay.
value to us. We're just gonna remove the obstruction. We don't want to. Yeah, oh, definitely not that. Don't wanna have to maintain private property.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Very comprehensive. Wonderful. All right. Let's move on to comments, and then we'll do the e-blast and head home. So this proclamation of National Public Works Week, is that something I can just say, I hereby proclaim Public Works Week?
Yes, and the plan was to, we're going to bring 3 proclamations. In case of Public Works, it will be retroactive, but
Okay,
declaring now.
I hear
brings us current.
to 4 declare. Yay! Awesome, thank you. Great, yeah. Oh, yeah, and then there's the Municipal Clerk Week coming up, too. Great. Okay, well, thank you so much for all of this information. There's so much moving. I was just thinking during, when you were talking about the ADA issue on Rockbridge Road, about how, Chief, you were the project manager on Pine Lake's behalf for that entire 5-year construction project, which is, now that we have somebody who's duty is overseeing construction of public situations. Wow, just want to reiterate what a huge lift that was, and thank you for carrying that.
I wouldn't have never made contact with those folks other than, our nosy police chief.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you,
thank
Chief.
you, Chief. That was huge. Okay, that's everything I have for public comment or for mayor comment. Any council comment before we move on to the e-blast?
Yes, I attended the GMA's Small Cities Conference this
Yeah.
past week, and it was a great learning experience. I focused on zoning, policy and advocacy for legislative support, which was very insightful. They did a rapid fire session. Most of it wasn't for projects that we could do, but there was a thing about drone innovation and youth drone projects that it's basically the future and we need to embrace it. And so there are some things that I'm going to be looking into. Our comprehensive planning and the benefits of having that worked out, and disaster preparedness, which kind of works into what I had been going with tree fall coverage and what to do about that. So I have a lot of things I'm going to be talking to our city manager and Mr. Kendrick and Ned about in the next, forever.
Great.
But I'll have a better report of what specifically I've learned and things that we talked about in each class that I'll send to council and everyone who wants to read it.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other council comment?
Would you be willing to write a quick little paragraph for the news blast?
Yes, and I'll get that to you Thursday.
And our city manager was also in attendance there, so.
For part of it, but Councilmember Torrent certainly covered us on the whole agenda.
Wonderful. Thank you both for taking the time to go on the behalf of the city here. Any other council comment? Okay, let's move on to the e-blast. I had two things. We were just a photo of the ribbon cutting pollination celebration. There were so many great photos. Thank you to Councilmember Ramsey. You had a lot of photos, and Calvin Bergamy was the ad hoc city photographer. So that was wonderful. Thank you for
You
those.
linked them into the website somewhere, didn't you? On the.
And then maybe also a
'cause
photo of,
I did it by accident and got to that. How did you do that? Where did
I
you
sent
do
a
that?
Google link,
Google Photos.
a Google album link
Uh-huh.
to Ned.
Oh, so he must,
Great.
so he did it. And
He probably did.
yeah,
I didn't.
I can't remember how I got there now, but
I
it's, there is a way to get to it on the website, all of his pictures.
Awesome.
I think it was just yours.
No, there's
There's
Is
some
there
from
more?
me,
Some from
some
Calvin.
from Calvin,
Yeah.
and some from Christine Witherspoon as
Awesome.
well.
Okay.
All great
So-
photographers there. Can we also include a photo of Mr. Kendrick on the cart there?
Already,
Okay,
yeah.
great. That's a fun one.
I sent it to everybody.
Oh, great, thank you.
I think I can. I have not yet really figured out how to get pictures in
I know, I
that
have-
stupid
Mm,
constant.
Mm-hmm. We could switch to Flowdesk. It's $19 a month, and it's very
Um,
user-friendly and
It's
beautiful.
something to consider because Constant Contact is a beast to work with, not user-friendly.
Yeah.
Ooh, you
Any
should've seen
other-
the one we had before.
Anything else for the e-blast?
I will go through the agenda and the different items like I have previously. I will send this out again as a draft. I noticed last time I only got one response, which I think got to me. For some reason, your response didn't get to me.
But I didn't, did you get my response? That I did not get it. I did not get.
So
and
what
I,
I'm
and I
gonna
was surprised and
I'm gonna do it differently. I've been sending it as a text through Constant Contact, and I'm not gonna do that anymore. I'm just gonna cut and paste it into a Word document and send it to you as an email. It's important to me that it's not just my eyes on that.
I think I responded to you from my personal email, because you sent it, you keep sending it to my personal email.
And I'm not sure I got that response. So it's
I
That's,
think,
that's a good idea in Word, and I like that idea.
Mhm.
Yeah,
think-
so I'll send it
I
as an
think we-
attachment to an email.
who you
Perfect.
send it to has to be in the contacts. So maybe hit, if it's his personal.
You've gotten it before, so.
Here, you sent it to,
Anything,
that's my.
anything
personal
else for the
email.
e-blast? Okay,
And I never got that response.
June 10th, Juneteenth.
is coming up.
Well, it went
Okay.
to info@finelake.net.
Councilmember Gerblord, did you get that one? The Juneteenth?
I have that
Just
written
coming up,
down,
okay,
yes. Do you
great.
have the QR code for
Uh,
info on that, and where?
Ned said that he had, I mean, he has the link, he hasn't done the QR code, so I'm hoping that, is he out
He was here earlier, but he had an engagement, but
for
he's in,
tonight?
he's in the
But
office
he'll be in the
tomorrow.
office tomorrow,
Yes.
so I should be able to get it by Thursday, I hope.
And remind me the location again. I have 10 to 2 on the 21st
The beach house.
at the beach house.
Great.
So I also
And
will,
yeah, so there was an article, there was a thing, wasn't there a thing last time?
there was a, yeah,
Yeah, but we just didn't have the, okay. And so I got that flyer that we were trying to put out before, and I'll finish that and send that to you.
okay. And then I know we need to put in the town hall meeting, and then we need to talk more.
Yes, so, Mr. Dykenhart is developing the agenda based on our discussion at our committee meeting. I'm going to be reviewing it with the mayor, tomorrow and getting your input and then getting it out to council for your input.
Thank you. Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Second?
And the proclamation.
Anyone?
A second?
Woods,
Yeah,
seconds,
I
all in
have
favor?
that.
Aye.
Aye.
I thought work
Are you all
sessions will go quickly.
3 hours in. Good work, y'all.
It means the council meeting will go quickly.
Yeah.
Do not jinx that.
Yeah, knock on marble.
I know. Oh, my God.
Wasn't there
All
something
right.